Om Tavakatamritam Taptajivanam Kavipiriditam Kalmashapam Sharavanamangalam Shrimadatatam Bhuvingarantiye Burida Janaha. The nectar of your words, the praise of poet seers, elixir to parched souls, delight to listening ears, cleanser of all sins is great and glorious. They who spread it far and wide on earth are most generous. Om, peace, peace, peace. Good evening, friends. Welcome back from our winter break, and we will continue with our study and reading of the Gospel of Sri Ramakrishna. And just by way of a quick review, Ramakrishna has been speaking with M and Pran Krishna, who were devotees that visited him regularly. But he was speaking, in this case, to Pran Krishna in particular, because he was following the path of Jnana Yoga, and Ramakrishna was trying in various ways to explain to him the differences between Bhakti Yoga and Jnana Yoga. And given Ramakrishna's insight, he could see, as he would describe, as one could see through a glass case, what the inner nature is of the person. And so he's trying to convince Pran Krishna that the path of Jnana Yoga, where one lives by or believes that Brahma alone is real, the world is illusory, and exclaiming that I am He, which is a phrase, one of the Mahavakyas in Hinduism, that I am divine. But Pran Krishna has been studying all the Vedanta scriptures and philosophies, but has not really understood their meaning. And so Ramakrishna is trying to convince him, well, look, you follow the path of bhakti, if by the grace of God he wills, he will bestow on you the knowledge of Brahman, or Brahmajnana. But Pran Krishna is not yet convinced. He still believes that he is qualified to follow the path of Jnana Yoga. And many people that come to Vedanta, studying the scriptures and philosophies, have a similar belief that they are, well, I'm an intellectual, I can understand this stuff, therefore I must be qualified for this path. But we're going to continue now in that conversation. And now he's speaking to M and Pran Krishna, and he's saying, many people talk of Brahmajnana, but their minds are always preoccupied with lower things, like house, buildings, money, name, and sense pleasures. So yes, we can talk like, oh, we believe that we are qualified to understand, to intellectually understand about Brahman, about God, but yet we can't live that life. We're still embroiled in our day-to-day activities. We need to make a living. We need to make provisions for our families. We have desires that we want to fulfill, either career-wise, family-wise. And we have enjoyments that we want to, we work to enjoy something, spend our money on something, whether it be cars, vacation, wealth, developing wealth. So if we have those kinds of worldly desires, can we really put all our energies into intellectually trying to understand about God? Because to properly understand something like God, which is We can't really see God in the way that we see this world. So we are not conscious of that God at all times. We're more conscious of the events and our participation in the world and the effect that the world has on us. So we react to the things of this world. And so we need to be able to, so Swami Nikhilananda is saying, well, develop devotion for God and become perfected in your devotions, and then by the grace of God, He will bestow on you the knowledge of Brahman. So now he continues, as long as you stand at the foot of the monument, and now he's referring to, there's a footnote to the Akhtar Loni monument in Calcutta. It has since been renamed to the Shahid Minar, which means it's a martyr's monument. It stands about 160 feet tall, and people could climb by a ladder system to get to the top of it. And I wouldn't be surprised if Ramakrishna climbed that monument. So he says, as long as you stand at the foot of the monument, so long you see the horses, the carriages, English men and English women. But when you climb to its top, you behold the sky and the ocean stretching to infinity. Then you do not enjoy buildings, carriages, horses, or men. They look like ants. So this tower, it's only about a quarter of the size of the Seattle Space Needle. So, but in those days, that was a very high perch to look over the city, looking over the Ganges. But it's also, sometimes for many people, they go out and climb a mountaintop, or they go hiking, or they go to an ocean, looking at the ocean over a cliff. All their worries and their concerns kind of like dissipate when you look at something that is so expansive as the ocean or the sky, that sense of grandness, that sense of infiniteness. Although it is limited, it is infinite as far as our little lives are concerned. So just as one might take off in an airplane and you start seeing everything disappearing, getting smaller and smaller, even to the point where the people are even smaller than ants. So all the concerns, all the worldly concerns, all the emotional attachments, even your hatred, your disgust, even love that you might have for people, all of that dissipates, because you're now in a different environment. You're seeing the great big sky. You're watching the oceans. That's what fills your mind, and all these other things they pale into insignificance, basically. At least for the time being. So, and that gives us a certain peace, and we feel a certain joy. So also, when the things of this world kind of dissipate and disappear, and we experience God, so also we are in that moment experiencing God. We are not going to be worrying about our investments, what our family thinks of us, what our friends think of us, or our careers, and all of that. But then you also won't be able to maintain any of that. So by following the path of bhakti, it's a gradual evolvement where, yes, those things we will lose interest in those things gradually as our mind becomes more and more attached to God. Ramakrishna is trying to convince Pran Krishna of that because he was still quite attached to the world. He was a deputy magistrate, so he had responsibilities. He had a family to raise. So it was not trying to say that God is real and the world is illusory. The world was not illusory for him. but he intellectually believed that God is real. So that's a starting point as to, well, if God is real, then let me at least develop devotion to that God. So that was his stepping stone that Sri Ramakrishna is trying to persuade him to follow. So then he continues, he says, all such things as attachment to the world and enthusiasm for lust and gold disappear after the attainment of the knowledge of Brahman. Then comes the cessation of all passions. So as we lose our attachment to this world and this enthusiasm, then we no longer, even the passions, those things that attracted us, those emotions that attract, or inclinations that attracted us to those things, we'll see them, well, they don't exist anymore. And then with that, all our emotional attachments will disappear with that. But that will come after because we've used those passions to become more attracted to God. So now those passions will now be directed toward our desire to experience God, our love for God, we'll have lust for God, we'll have a real intense attachment to God, no longer for the worldly attachments. And then he continues and says that when the log burns, it makes a crackling noise and one sees the flame. When the burning is over, only ash remains, then no more noise is heard. So a log will only burn as long as there is wood in the log. But as parts of it turn to charcoal and to ash, they will no longer be able to burn with the same intensity as the actual wood within the log. This wood is like the things that we are attached to in this world. But if we have the fire of dispassion and renunciation, that will burn away those attachments until all that remains will just be ash. There will be no more flame. There will be nothing to be dispassionate about or renounce, because all that will remain is ash, God. And and then he says that the thirst for enjoyment also disappears with the destruction of attachment. And then finally comes peace. Because then the mind is not going out and being distracted by so many things. And by then, he says, the nearer you come to God, the more you feel peace. Peace, 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 supreme peace. The nearer you come to the Ganges, the more you feel its coolness. You will feel completely soothed when you plunge into the river. So you will feel all that. If you come to any large body of water, you will feel a cool breeze from it, and that will comfort any heat that you might feel. So, and give you some relief. So when he's saying even peace, well, he's really meaning you will feel relief from this world, from the attachments to this world. That relief will invoke a sense of peace. But the universe and its created beings and the 24 cosmic principles all exist because God exists. Nothing remains if God is eliminated. So when he says the universe, its created beings, the 24 cosmic principles, the 24 cosmic principles are based on Sankhya philosophy, where you have Purusha and Prakriti, Purusha being the supreme soul, and Prakriti being like Mother Nature, that part of God that creates this world. But you have multiple Purushas, the individual souls. Prakriti does not have control over those individual souls. That is those individual Purushas, those individual souls are part of the cosmic soul of God. But Prakriti cannot exist by itself and needs to have God there. So he gives an illustration, says the number increases if you put many zeros behind the figure 1. So you put a 1, and you put a 0, it becomes 10, then it becomes 100, 1,000, keep adding zeros for as many souls as there are. That gives that number value. But you take away the 1, the God, and everything is 0. Nothing exists without that, without God. So he continues, there are many who come down, as it were, there are some that come down, as it were, after attaining the knowledge of Brahman, after samadhi. Samadhi is the mental state that one achieves when one experiences God. There are many different levels of samadhi, but at the highest level, one experiences the knowledge of Brahman. But some are able to come down from that state. And when they do, they retain an ego of knowledge or the ego of devotion. So, before this, he has described, Krishna has understood that the path of knowledge must be the most superior, and he was fit for that. But Swami Krishna is also telling him, well, look, if God so wills, you can come back with the knowledge of Brahman, and you would retain the ego of knowledge or the ego of devotion. So it's not like it's complete cessation of the self, but he also says that only some do that. It only happens to some, by the grace of God, that they can retain that ego of knowledge. Well, they retain the ego of knowledge to teach, or the ego of devotion, also to teach devotion to God for those that are not capable of understanding the intellectual aspect of God. So he also mentions that just as in the case of sages like Narada, he kept the ego of devotion. Shankaracharya kept the ego of knowledge. Both kept it so they can teach humanity about God. So he also uses an example, just as there are people who, of their own sweet will, stay in the marketplace after the market breaks up. So in India, you'll see big bazaar, many individuals have their little stalls set up to sell items that people need on a daily basis. And some will pack up early when they have sold their goods, but others might stay behind in case last minute people come and might need something. So they do so out of compassion for humanity. Okay, I have some that you can use. Here it is, I'm waiting for you. So that he's used as an example of those that out of compassion come back to this world, retaining the ego of knowledge or devotion to help humanity. And why do they do that? Out of love. Even following the path of knowledge, one can only do that out of love, just as one does so out of love when they retain the ego of devotion. So God cannot be realized if there, or he gives an example, God cannot be realized if there is the slightest attachment to the things of the world. A thread cannot pass through the eye of a needle if the tiniest fiber sticks out. I don't know how many of you try to sew by hand and try to fit a thread into a needle, and some fiber you didn't cut off properly, you still can't put that thread through that eye of that needle. A lot of effort is needed, and you might have to recut the thread. So even one little fiber makes it very difficult. So the slightest desire for any kind of attachment, any kind of worldly attachment, one cannot realize God. I mean, a worldly desire, as opposed to a desire to realize God. And he continues, the anger and lust of a man who has realized God are only appearances. They are like a burnt string. It looks like a string, but a mere puff blows it away. So when one is channeling all their emotions toward God, one can be angry at God for not giving him the knowledge of Brahman, for not showing his vision, not allowing you to experience his vision, not allow you to become a better person. You get angry at God. What's going on here? I've done all my spiritual practices and still you're denying me your presence. So it's okay to get angry with God. But that can also be the anger that you've had toward the world or toward to your friends and so forth, or to people in general. You're sublimating that now into the anger to God for not for not showing himself to you. Or you have intense lust and attachment to the things of this world. If you channel that toward intense lust and attachment to God, then he becomes the primary thing you desire. All these other worldly desires kind of like fade away. So when you do experience God with all those emotions, there are going to come times, even when you have experienced God, that those emotions are there, but people misunderstand it as being worldly emotions. But really, you see God everywhere. But they might say, oh, you're directed toward this object or that object. But really, your mind is seeing divinity and all those things. So worldly desires you have dispensed with, just like you blow away ash. They no longer have that concrete shape of a worldly object. Those have all turned to ash. So he says, God is realized as soon as the mind becomes free from attachment. Whatever appears in the pure mind is the voice of God. So we all have this sense of egotism, and we think, oh, anything I think, I'm thinking, I'm doing. But when you have lost that sense of ego, then any thought that comes to your mind can only be thoughts about God, or knowledge about God, not anything personal. So whatever appears in the pure mind is the voice of God. That which is pure mind is also pure buddhi, or pure intellect, pure knowledge. That again is pure Atman. That is the essence, your pure essence, your soul. The cosmic. You become aware of that cosmic soul, not the individual soul, because there is nothing pure but God. And in order to realize God, one must go beyond dharma and adharma. One must go beyond righteous and unrighteous actions. However, what is a righteous or an unrighteous action can be dependent on the person. What might be righteous for one person to do may not be righteous for another. What is unrighteous for one may not be unrighteous to the other. A sannyasin, it would be unrighteous for them to kill, but it is righteous action for a soldier in a war to kill in order to protect. So in order to realize God, one must go beyond what is righteous and unrighteous, because God decides what actions to be performed. Only God is ultimately the one performing all action. Our concept of action is, oh, there must be good action and bad action. We are the one making that distinction. But from God's point of view, there is nothing righteous or unrighteous. That only applies to this material world. So in order to realize God, one must be able to go beyond worldly actions. So the Master sang in his melodious voice, "Come, let us go for a walk, O mind, to Kali, the wish-fulfilling tree, and there beneath it gather the 4 fruits of life." So these 4 fruits of life are basically 4 goals that man lives for. And one of them will be righteous action. And the Sanskrit word for that will be dharma. And he might also live for artha, wealth. The purpose of life is to get as much wealth as possible. The more you get, the happier you'll be. And whoever gets the most wins. So that's one of the goals of life. Also, another goal of life is kama, to live life, to experience the pleasures of life, all the pleasures that one can get in life, and also one can live for moksha, the desire to be liberated in this life. So those are considered the 4 fruits of life, the 4 goals of life. And in various proportions, everybody will strive for one or the other at various times in their life. So after this song, Sri Ramakrishna went out to the southeast veranda of his room and sat down. Pran Krishna and the other devotees accompanied him. Hazra, too, was sitting there. Often Hazra would sit outside on the veranda while Sri Ramakrishna was inside giving his teachings. And it was not uncommon for him to sit out there and encourage people to give him money. Or he'll give some teachings to them, which might be a little contrary to what Sri Ramakrishna might teach. But anyway, he was sitting out there, and now Sri Ramakrishna is making a little joke. He says to Pran Krishna with a smile, "Hazra is not a man to be trifled with. If one finds a big darga here," darga, he's referring to himself, darga is a burial place where saints will usually be buried. And so he says, if one finds the big darga here, then Hazra is the smaller darga, the smaller saint. And all laughed at the Master's words. A certain gentleman, Navakumar by name, came to the door and stood there. At the sight of the devotees, he immediately left. And then Sri Ramakrishna remarked, "Oh, egotism incarnate." He was too embarrassed to ask any question or to sit in front of Sri Ramakrishna with other people around him, and was feeling embarrassed. So then, about 9:30 in the morning, Pran Krishna took leave of the Master. So I will stop there for today. These are the teachings that Pran Krishna has received from Sri Ramakrishna. And we'll meet him later on in the Gospel. Meanwhile, he's got some things to go home and think about. So if you have any questions, and think about them while I give some announcements. Tomorrow evening, Swami Brahmatmananda, who stays at our retreat property, the Tapovan, will be giving a class via Google Meet on the book Towards the Goal Supreme. The book is nearing an end. I think there may only be maybe another month or so, or two. The link for that will be on our website if you haven't received the email link. And this Friday, Swami Satyamananda will continue with part 2 of a new class where we study the book on self-knowledge, or Atmabodha. In particular, we're looking at the translation given by Swami Nikhilananda, who was head of our New York Center back in the early days. And on this Saturday at 1 p.m., we will have a meditation retreat at our Tapovan retreat. So you're all invited to attend that. There's no need to sign up for anything, just show up. It'll go until about 5 o'clock. They will have Arti at 6 o'clock. You're welcome to stay behind for that also. And the talk this Sunday at 10 a.m. will be given by Swami Satyamananda on the Vedas. Excuse me. The title is The Vedas, God's Mind. And Mother's Children, as our Sunday school is there for the children, so the parents can attend that class. The children should be there by 9:50. So thank you very much for attending today in person and online. And I will conclude with a chant. Om Niranjanam Nityam Anantarupam Bhaktanukampa Dritavigraham Vai Ishavataram Paramesamityam Tvam Ramakrishnam Shirasa Namamaha. We salute that Ramakrishna who is without blemish, who is eternal and infinite in forms, who has assumed human form out of compassion for the devotees, who is God incarnate, the Supreme Lord, and who is most worshipful. Om, peace, peace, peace to all beings.